the purpose of the Contrarian Capitalist, I always say, it's the same. It's to defend your freedom, protect your wealth, outsmart the system. And it's to give ideas to people about what could the benefits of physical metals be? What could the benefits of Plan B be for you moving forwards? So that's the purpose of it. And again, it's to help as many people as can around the world. And I think by documenting what I'm doing, as far as I'm concerned, as long as that inspires someone out there to do something about their situation, that's fine. That makes it all worthwhile.
Hi everyone, so I'm here today with Robert from the Contrarian Capitalist. So welcome, Robert. And I'm kind of curious. So we're obviously both from the UK, but we're here from Mexico City today. So what led you to come to Mexico City from the UK?
Well, Adam, first of all, pleasure to be here. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to even come to Mexico. So it's an honour. My wife is Mexican. So in a nutshell, because of my wife, that is why I'm here as well. And a big advocate for Plan B in general. But yeah, the main reason I'm here is because my wife is Mexican and we have decided to carve out a life here for the time being.
Fantastic. So you're relatively new, aren't you, overseas? I think you moved, what was it, 7 or 8 years? Oh, months ago, should I say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 7 months ago, give and take.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I've done a lot of traveling before. I like traveling. I've been to different various parts of the world, and that's given me the international mindset as a result. But yes, in terms of being physically in Mexico itself, it's been about 7 months.
And your background before that, like business-wise, was it focused on a specific area or were you in like 2 or 3 different industries?
So my background itself, after university, back in the day down in Brighton, I've got a property business with my business partner back in the UK. Been doing that for nearly 10 years now. He now deals with most, if not all, of the day-to-day aspects of that. So that is my background. But because I knew that I would be making the move abroad, then that's where the Contrarian Capitalist was born. I think everyone had a lot of spare time about 5 years ago. So there was a lot of time there to study, really get involved in different things. And that path has led me to where I am today. So that's where the Contrarian Capitalist comes from. So that's been in operation full time for about a year. And part of that was wanting to document a journey, but also knowing that I wouldn't be physically at home, as I say, to do that. That's why that brand exists.
Fantastic. Now, obviously for a lot of people, if they're not happy in their home country, it's quite a big step, that first country and that first move, right? Because if you've been overseas as long as I have been and you're used to moving around, it doesn't feel like such a big step, if that makes sense. But the first time you move overseas, it feels like a big step, even if you're relatively young. So for you, did it feel like a big step, would you say? Or because you traveled a lot, was it kind of like a natural move for you to go overseas? Or were you kind of nervous, would you say, before making the move?
Oh, that's a cracking question, Adam. I'm a little bit nervous, I won't lie, because it wasn't just a case of I'm over here for a month and that's it. There was a part of me that I remember leaving Gatwick, thinking, having a good look round, because I was thinking to myself, I don't think I'm going to be back for a very long time, if ever. So there's a little part of me that was quite sad from that point of view. But yeah, having travelled before, getting on a plane for 10 or 12 hours, not an issue. And then the excitement of knowing that it's a new chapter in life. This is what this could lead to. So I had mixed emotions, I'd say, at the time.
Yeah, I think I felt similarly actually when I moved overseas. Now, it's interesting. In many countries now, and the UK is a good example of this, things are not as they could be. Let's just put it like that, right? So there's a lot of people who are going to be watching this who are from the UK or they're overseas, or indeed they're in places even like Canada that's losing a lot of people right now. I think wealthy people similar to the UK. And we're talking before the cameras rolled about like Plan B and Plan C and so on, which is part of what the Contrarian Capitalist does. Could you tell me a bit more about that and how you help people when it comes to Plan A, Plan B, Plan C?
So the whole purpose of it is to, number one, document what's going on. So I'm happy to document what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. I'm quite open with that. And it's really to give people the idea that you can do the same and that it can be cost effective. So yeah, maybe some assumptions are, if people are thinking about moving country, people might think that it's very expensive to do that. Well, I sort of look at it the other way. It's like, well, if you stay where you are and you are, say, putting all your eggs in the same basket, actually, what's the cost implication of that? Because if something were to happen, I'm sure we'd talk about things that might happen that are quite bad, but they might happen, and you're trapped in wherever you are, then that's probably going to do you more damage in the future rather than now. So really, the purpose of the Contrarian Capitalist, I always say, it's the same. It's to defend your freedom, protect your wealth, outsmart the system. And it's to give ideas to people about what could the benefits of physical metals be? What could the benefits of Plan B be for you moving forwards? So that's the purpose of it. And again, it's to help as many people as can around the world. And I think by documenting what I'm doing, as far as I'm concerned, as long as that inspires someone out there to do something about their situation, that's fine. That makes it all worthwhile.
So for this like plan B and plan C, is it more like investing overseas or is it like having a second residency? How does it kind of work in terms of obviously your suggestions? Of course, for different people, there'll be different suggestions, but like in general, what are you kind of suggesting to people right now?
Certainly look for residency abroad. You can invest overseas as well. That's not something I've personally got around to doing yet. It's on the to-do list. But I'd certainly say getting a plan B, getting a temporary residency somewhere, a permanent residency, because you can do that by investment in certain parts of the world. You could also happen to possibly get dual citizenship if you have certain ancestry. So there are countries that can do that. So the purpose of that and the idea of that, again, is not to put all your eggs in one basket. I think, again, we were saying off camera, weren't we, that you can... It's very easy to just live life day to day. And if you're not paying attention to what's going on around the world on the geopolitical point of view, you could end up in a situation where you could be trapped. And if you end up in that situation and then you know that you could have done something different, you could have done something about it. For me, that's not a situation I personally want to be in. And I don't think other people should be in that situation either.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we're in Mexico right now, and a lot of people all over Latin America, they really understand that it's good to get your money out or some of your money out. You might want to put some money in the local basket, but you want some money in US dollars, or for that matter, in kind of hard assets. And, US stock market investing is massive in Latin America and so on. But I think sometimes in most Western countries, obviously the Eastern and Central European countries that went through communism, they're a bit different in this way. But I think the UK and many Western countries, because we've had it relatively good since 1945, people often assume things can't happen here like they do in other people's countries. So even though the UK, like we had a situation where the pound was 5-1, I think, against the dollar in 45, then it was 2-1 when I was traveling in 2007. And now it's kind of closer to 1-1, even though it's like 1.3, whatever. We haven't had like an absolutely major crisis, right? And I don't know what you think, but sometimes I think people are a bit complacent and they think the UK could never become like a Brazil or something like that, where it's up and down all the time. I mean, what's your impression of that, having lived in Latin America, but obviously originally from the UK?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. To be honest there, Adam, I think it's complacency is bad in all walks of life. And I think people should be aware of what's going on. It's a lot easier nowadays with social media and things like that. People can, especially with AI as well, people can sort of seek, the truth. And I use that term loosely. But there's a lot of propaganda out there on both sides of the political spectrum. There's a lot of propaganda out there. So I'm not going to sit here and say what's right and what's wrong. But ultimately, we should not get complacent. And we've started to see, I think Spain's introduced capital controls about how much you can take out in euros from an ATM, I think it is. Maybe it's 3,000 euros or something along those lines. I don't know the number exactly. Yeah. So could the same thing happen in the UK? Well, it's possible. We're 2.7 trillion, I think, in debt. We have a government at the moment who inherited, they said, a 22 billion pound black hole, and they've magically turned it into somewhere between 40 and 50 billion in 12 months. I think most people out there, maybe it's a British thing, will laugh at that, but actually we should look at the connotations of that. We're on a slippery slope for a multitude of reasons. And could it get a lot worse before things get better? Absolutely. You have to look at where the UK is in the world in terms of the geography. and what the leaders of the EU, I think, are trying to do at the moment, again, geopolitically. And I don't think that's going to end up very well, personally. So that was part of the reason of actually wanting to move away as well. And this is a conversation my wife and I had. We looked at UK and Mexico, and we sat down and we went through all the pros and cons. And I brought this up in conversation. I said, I have a feeling, number one, I don't trust my government anyway, no matter who's in charge. Secondly, I have a very bad feeling that things could get a lot worse. And I mean in terms of an overall war. I hope they don't. I really hope they don't. But if I'm being realistic, I think it's likely to happen. And therefore, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of a country where I don't agree with number one what they're doing. But secondly, and I use this lightly because I hope it doesn't happen, if it gets to the stage where it gets that desperate, you might get conscripted, whether you want to or not. If that happens, no, I'm out. I don't want a part of that personally. So that's one reason. Yeah, the financial aspect doesn't help either. I think that we're on a very slippery slope there. And ultimately, I don't really think it matters who's in charge in general. But certainly the current government that we have haven't done a great job.
Absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned about Spain and, making it difficult to take out a lot of cash from the ATM, or certainly it might prompt reporting. And what's interesting is when I spoke to one or two clients living in Mexico about 4 or 5 years ago, they were coming from places like Canada, and they actually came to Mexico because the restrictions were lifted very quickly here, relatively speaking. And they felt like there was just too many restrictions in Canada because obviously you had the whole trucker movement at that time and so on. But what's interesting is, especially outside of the US, if you look at Europe, Canada and so on, there seems to be almost like an attack on personal freedom and more regulations, more restrictions and so on. So that could also prompt people to seek other places, because believe it or not, these days, probably you feel more free in Mexico than you would in, say, Canada or the UK, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd caveat that I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Mexican government recently passed a digital ID law. So there's probably a caveat to that. But no, in general, the amount of times I can just walk around and I haven't had a problem. There's not as much regulation here, so there's not as much red tape. So I think for people wanting to get by on a day-to-day basis in Mexico in general, I think it's a very liberating country. But I think you've hit the nail on the head there, again there, Adam, where if we say you're coming from Canada or you come from the UK, when there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape, actually to come to a place such as Mexico, there might still be quite a lot of red tape. If there is, I haven't discovered it yet. But because of where we've come from, actually it is quite liberating. So yeah, it's certainly been a very eye-opening 7 months so far.
Yeah, and also the cost of entry in some markets. Like, for example, if you're in the UK and you want to give financial advice to local British people and you're living in the UK, getting a financial conduct authority authorization is not a cheap thing, right? And it's not necessarily cheap in Mexico for people doing it locally. But I'm sure like the barriers to entry must be a bit lower in most Latin American countries compared to, say, the UK. So, for example, Panama, I know several people who got Panamanian financial licenses because it was so much easier than actually many European or Western markets. So, and that kind of leads me to something, and that's that we spoke about Panama and Paraguay before rolling the cameras. What do you think the benefits of these countries are for expats and people looking for like low cost of living or low tax living?
Oh, before I answer that, I should probably say, please don't take any of this as financial advice. I'm not, I'm not FCA regulated or anything like that. I'm just, saying this from experience. So please don't take it as personal advice. The things that Panama has and that Paraguay has they are very tax efficient. I was there in both countries about 11 years ago now. So it's been a while since I've been back. But they're both very successful countries in terms of their tax efficiency. So, and again, this is from examples. I know people that have got, for example, Panama foundations, and because of their banking rules and regulations and how they like to do business, they are a very tax efficient vehicle, shall we say, in Panama. So I know that people might think of the Panama Papers back in the UK and people got upset about that, but ultimately it was nothing illegal. At all. It was perfectly legal for them to do. Again, it goes back to people making mountains out of molehills, I'll say.
Mm.
Paraguay's got a lot more advantages, I think. Paraguay is water efficient. It is energy efficient as well. It's also food resilient. So, for example, there's a massive dam in Paraguay. I think it's called the Itaipu Dam. I think that is one of the biggest hydroelectrical plants in the world. So, actually, Paraguay's electrical production capacity is greater than its uses. So, from that point of view, it's very good. There's about 6 million people in Paraguay. It's got food for many more than 6 million people. I don't know the number off the top of my head. And again, because of the dam and because of the rivers over there, it's water efficient as well. And it actually sits on top of a massive waterbed as well. So it's right in the middle of South America, Paraguay. And from a tax point of view, at the moment, again, this might change in the future, I don't know. But if you are in Paraguay and you are or you're generating income in Paraguay, and this is from a personal point of view, your income tax rate, I believe, is about 10%. But if you are earning foreign sourced income, so i.e. you are doing, I don't know, consultancy work for international clients like you do, your income, sorry, not income rate, your tax rate is 0. So actually you could make the change if you wanted to. And actually Paraguay is a very nice country. But you could make that change and you could go from, I don't know, a 30 or 40% tax rate for parts of the EU, move yourself over there. I appreciate that's a big change, but you could do that, and then all of a sudden you'll set yourself up properly with the right structure, and your legal tax rate is 0. I think most people, if you ask most people in the world, if they could reduce their taxes legally, would they do it? I think most people would, and there are plenty of places out there that can do that.
Absolutely. But what's interesting about Paraguay is I've never been to Paraguay, but from what I understand, it feels less familiar to Western people compared to, say, Costa Rica, Panama, or Mexico. So I guess with Paraguay, learning Spanish is even more important probably than in Mexico, right? And I get the impression, although it must be changing because more people are going in, it's a bit more, I don't know if conservative is the right word, but it's certainly more of a localized experience probably. So people who go there maybe are looking for something different than, say, people who live in, I don't know, Panama, for example.
I think conservative is the right word. I think even they would describe themselves as a conservative country, to be honest. As I said, there's about 6 million people. I think about half of them, or about the Asuncion, which is the capital city, and the greater areas, about 3 million. So it's quite concentrated, similar to, say, like London and England itself. It's a very concentrated capital city. It's got pretty much everything you need, I think, over there. So it's been a while since I've been there. I have seen photos of how it's changed. I've speak to a lot of people from down there as well. And again, the boots on the ground at the moment is that it's got a lot going for it. It's very open with some policies. But overall, yes, it's a conservative country. But when I was traveling there with my business partner, or my now business partner, Paraguay wasn't really, even in the Lonely Planet guide, it was a country that didn't have a lot to say about it. We went there and we had a absolutely fantastic couple of weeks, and I've already had a soft spot for it. So it's off the beaten track. It's not easy to, unless you're in South America, it's not the easiest of countries to get to either. So you've got to put a bit of effort in with Paraguay, but I do think the rewards that you can get out of it are very good.
Well, that kind of leads me to something, right? Because it's about familiarity as well. I guess for many Americans or Canadians listening to this, living in Mexico, living in Costa Rica, living in Panama feels quite familiar. Maybe living in Paraguay less so, but it might still seem, somewhat familiar, but, to a much lesser extent. But coming from people from the UK, I think for us, obviously going to Europe is familiar. And these days, like living in Dubai feels quite familiar to many people. But Latin America doesn't feel that familiar. Even Mexico doesn't feel that familiar to people. So like when you speak to people back home and they ask you about like life in Mexico and so on, I guess for them, like if they were to live in Mexico, it'd feel like a much bigger jump than even moving to Dubai or certainly mainland Europe, right? So I guess you didn't feel that though because of your wife, maybe, right, being from Mexico.
Yeah, no, I'm okay with the language as well. I'm learning every day. I'm not the most proficient Spanish speaker in the world, but I can get by, which is important. So I think making that effort helps as well. And right, you know as well as I do, English people are notoriously not good at learning other languages.
Yes.
Because, again, we are lucky to come from the country whose, language is one of the most spoken in the world, with the exception of, say, Spanish and French and Mandarin as well, actually. So, yeah, English people are very bad at languages in general. But I do think that learning a bit of the language helps. Yes, I've been here a few times before. Obviously got the familiarity because my wife is from here as well. But yeah, it depends on where you go. Everywhere's different. I mean, Mexico City, I don't want to compare it directly to London because I think it's crazier than London. It's obviously bigger than London as well. But what I love about Mexico City, you'll never get bored. There's always something to do. It's a massive cultural hub as well. It's also an international hub, so very easy to get to and from. And I think that really helps as well. So from that point of view, it is like London. But yeah, if you're not used to the big city vibe, moving here, for example, would be, I think, would put a lot of people off just from how busy and chaotic it is. But there are some fantastic and beautiful parts of this country that I would urge people to get out and explore.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is when I came into Mexico, I was very impressed by how easy it was in terms of, yes, we're lucky with British passports, but I just went through the e-gates, didn't have to speak to anyone. There was no queue. And it was actually much easier than even many airports in the EU. So I was very impressed. And, as you say, we are also lucky in that way. We can travel more easily than some nationalities. And the language is well spoken all around the world, which, you're lucky in some ways. But as you say, sometimes it means you, or some people don't put in the effort they should maybe with the languages. But kind of going back to what you're doing with the Contrarian Capitalist. Now, no one can see the future for sure in terms of no one can predict with absolute accuracy what's going to happen in the future. But we were talking off air, and I was saying that I think that the British government, whilst they won't actually bring in the citizenship by taxation system, at least for the next decade or so, there is a chance they'll maybe make the rules tighter. So already HMRC has the ties test. They might make it much more tighter to kind of bring more people into the net. What do you think about that? Do you think the UK government might do that? Do you think there's a higher risk of that happening in the next few years?
Are the UK government going to do it? Yes. Is it the right thing to do? No. We've seen in the last, and again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we have seen with changes to capital gains tax and how the government have approached that the receipts from capital gains tax have decreased. So for those that are people, there's going to be people that are familiar with the Laffer curve. I know that you're familiar with it, Adam, but I'll explain anyway. But basically, it's a correlation between the amount that is taxed and the revenue that the government gets from something. So basically, it looks like a bell curve to an extent. So it goes up like that. And if you go up the curve like that, you've got 2 points about here. Okay. And basically, those tax points will generate, in theory, the same amount of revenue for the government. But one tax rate's very high. The other tax rate is not as high. And I think our government is going to go down the high route when actually what I think they should do, and it's not the most politically viable thing to do, but it's the right thing to do, lower taxes. You've got to make it easier. You've got to make things easier. You've got to, JD Vance and is holidaying or was holidaying recently in the UK. He has been, I think, given a fine for not having the correct fishing license.
David Lammy as well.
With
right?
David Lammy.
Yeah.
And then some people in the Bull in Charlbury, and I won't go on to my political high horse, I think have missed out on a massive opportunity because the staff, I think, refused to want to either serve JD Vance or did not want him in their establishment. And that was in the Cotswolds, a very nice part of the country, as you know, and they've missed out on a massive opportunity. I think the capitalism in the UK is going down the toilet, to be honest. If that was me running that restaurant and the vice president of the United States of America wanted to come in for a meal with his entourage and have some drinks, I'd be all over that. Get a photo opportunity, get Instagram. That on the wall, Instagram, the hell out of that. Because maybe the local people might not like that, but there's a lot of American tourism in the UK. And if they go, JD Vance went there, you might not like him, I don't know. If JD Vance was there, I want to go there. And that's the mentality that we've got nowadays. But going back to your question, yeah, I think it will come. Is it the right thing to do? Absolutely not. It would be incredibly detrimental to the UK, but I do think I do think it will come. And again, I'll refer back to the Laffer curve. If people don't know what that is, just Google it, and you'll see that correlation that taxes do need to be between 0 and 100. It doesn't work at 0 and it doesn't work at 100 because, well, it just doesn't. So you've got to have taxes at somewhere in the middle. That doesn't mean the answer is 50%, but it's got to be on that curve somewhere. And again, there's 2 points where the government can generate the same amount of revenue. One's going to be at a higher tax rate, one's going to be at a lower. I've long said the UK needs to take a leaf out of Singapore's book. And last time I checked, it was about 15% flat tax across the board. Just do that and you'll see the country flourish. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned about like the whole kind of Lammy thing and JD Vance, because that really shows what's wrong about the UK in some ways, like, you know, needing a fishing license to go fishing. It's a load of nonsense, right? So it's very interesting. And I think we forget that as well. It's not just taxes, it's too much regulation in the UK. And I think maybe people in public office could be better at explaining certain things in terms of, I'll give you an example where the UK does do things right. You know, Companies House, it's very easy in the UK. It's the easiest country in the world to set up a business. It might not be great to run the business with the regulation, but setting up a business is very easy. It's cheap, it's easy, right? And you can do it almost instantly on Companies House, or you can use an incorporation company, you know, online, and they'll do it for you. It's incredibly easy. Which country has the most companies in the world by far? The UK, because the UK makes it easy. So more people do it because you make it easy. And I think business is often like that. If you make something easy, more people will do it. But if you make things hard, fewer people will do it, right? But the UK, I think, doesn't have enough success stories like that. I think the Companies House is one of the few. But then you look at the UK, it might be easy to set up. It might be not a bad place if you're just making 20, 30, 40 grand, maybe. But then even then, the regulation is not great. But as soon as you scale a business, you just get taxed the hell out of. There's regulation. So I think, yeah, making things easier for entrepreneurs as well, not just lowering tax, would be so fantastic. Like fewer regulations. I think that's a huge part of it as well.
What is the reason why companies like Amazon and Starbucks have their tax offices in either Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and the Republic of Ireland? Yeah, the red tape's a pain in the backside, to say the least. And again, I should point out, I do love my homeland. You know, I always say I like to say I'm English. You know, I love England. It's got pros and cons, of course, like any place. So I don't want to make this sound like I just hate the UK and I hate England and I'm bashing everything. But we need to be realistic at the moment, and what's going on and what's happening isn't good. Yes, let's see, I think Companies House is a very good example there. But as you said, once you get up and running, you know, yes, if you have the right power team, you have the right network, you can make things, even in the UK, you can make things as tax efficient as possible. There are a lot of wonderful incentives out there if you're in the right industry and you have the right people around you. So I think having a team around you is important. But yes, you are right. And I think that JD Vance example is a very good one, that even with I forget David Lammy's position.
I think he's the. I know he's. I was going to say, I know he's quite forgettable, but I think he is the foreign secretary. Yeah,
the foreign secretary.
Yeah.
So the fact that the foreign secretary, who also got a fine, by the way, for not having a fishing rod, for not having the right fishing license, it's just, yeah, it's a bit mental. So I do think if we're going to become, or want to become, again, entrepreneurial, and this centre, London is a massive centre for finance. London's a centre for all sorts of other dark political things we don't need to get into. But it's the name itself helps. London. You say London, you think power and prestige and finance and all those sorts of things. But I do think in the UK in general, yeah, there's too much red tape. And if we made it easier and you weren't getting taxed to the high hills, I think that would make it easier as well. And do I think that's going to happen? I honestly don't think that's going to happen, but it should happen.
And what's interesting as well, because I, like many people, obviously use Uber a lot when I'm traveling, and I came here for this interview via Uber. And it's an example I often think about, because the founder of Uber, Travis something, I forgot his second name, he actually basically wasn't actually completely compliant when he started the business. So I remember Mark Cuban, the Shark Tank judge and billionaire, said he didn't want to actually invest in Uber, even though he loved the idea of Uber, because basically Travis was saying that his idea was he was going to seek forgiveness rather than ask for permission. He wanted Uber to get so big that even once the fines came in for not being legally compliant or whatever, it wouldn't matter because the cat was out of the bag. So I think like London tried to ban Uber. I think Sydney and many places tried to ban Uber, but it was too late. And the same thing with the whole crypto thing, right? In terms of, the crypto people didn't wait for the regulators to approve it. They just went ahead and then it forced the regulators to regulate. So I think even in the Western world, the only reason why we have some innovation is entrepreneurs do decide, okay, I'm just going to, not ask for permission. I'm going to, seek forgiveness. I'm just going to do it and see what happens. Because otherwise, I think nothing would happen now because like there's so many regulations. So like it's almost impossible to start things in some countries now, isn't it? Pretty much.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think there's a perfect political system. And in conversations that I've had, it's always a case of looking at the East, looking at China. So I don't necessarily think their political structural system is great, personally.
Yes.
However, if you want a major project getting built, they will build that very quickly, and they're very good at doing it because they also have that ability to. I use a rail network, for example. Now, there's some fantastic projects actually happening in Mexico at the moment. So they're connecting Mexico City with Toluca, which is about 60, I think, kilometers west of here. They're also building a railway line to a new airport north of Mexico City. So again, that's getting built. And we've seen the Maya train over in the Cancun, Merida area. And they're also looking at building railway lines up to Querétaro and I think it's León and Guadalajara, I think, up in the northwest. So there's massive infrastructure projects happening here in Mexico. But the reason I put that into the equation is I'm sure people might be familiar with HS2.
Yeah.
That says everything you need to know. Your reaction says everything you need to know. So it's how expensive and inefficient can a government make it? Well, there's the answer. I'm not going to go into the details of it. But the fact is that we're going to go to these places. Okay, now we're going here. Oh, how many platforms do we need here? Okay, now we're going to terminate it here. And £60 billion later, nothing's really happened. Politics aside, the Chinese are building thousands and thousands of kilometers a year, going from Beijing to Shanghai or going to the Gobi Desert or wherever it needs to go, and they just build it because maybe that you could argue that's a way to stimulate the economy and that's got its own dangers, but because of the way the political system is, if China wants to build something between A and B, that's getting built whether you like it or not, and it'll probably get built in about 10 days. Whereas in the UK, you've just highlighted it, regulation, or someone complains about this, or someone complains about that, and then we need to do more, taxpayer surveys, and we need more, consultancy fees, and that's taxpayers' cash at the end of the day. So the point being that no matter where you are in the world, you're going to have loads of infrastructure projects happening, and I think the political system behind that can be a help and a hindrance, or a hindrance. And I do think in the West with the regulations, like you said, there's too much, there's too many, and I think that hinders production in the West, where we can look at China. We don't have to like China. I like China, but you don't have to like China. You don't have to agree with their politics, but they will get stuff done because they have also the political ability to do that. So pros and cons basically to everything.
Yeah, and I think another factor as well with regulation is a lot of people don't do the maths when it comes to compounding. So for example, you know how Einstein said it's the eighth wonder of the world, and a lot of people do understand now because of social media that people can actually get relatively wealthy on an average income once they're much older because of this process of compounding, right? Someone who's 60 years old might have X and Y amount of money, but once they're 90, before they die, it might be a bit sad, but they might have loads of money because it all kind of compounds to a crescendo. I'm sure you've heard about those stories about those people who have like died at 92 and they're like a secretary and they have like $8 million and all they've done is like held onto assets for decades. But I think when it comes to regulation, people don't do the maths, because if it's going up by 2 or 3% per year over 100 or 200 years, that's massive. So Peter Thiel, the tech entrepreneur, made the example that apparently in New York, even adjusted for inflation, it's 100 times more expensive now to build on the New York system than it was 100 years ago. So basically 100 years ago, they could build 100 meters for what they can build 1 meter for now. And of course, I'm sure there's a few less accidents, But obviously health and safety and regulation was blamed. So I think that's another thing, because we've been adding for so long. Now just adding 2 or 3% every year is massive. So I think another example was when George Osborne came into power in the UK. He said very sensibly he wanted to simplify the tax code, which was already bigger than the Bible. But when he left, I think it was double the size or something, and now it's like quadruple or something, because it's just all compounded and compounded. So I think that's another factor, right? It just all builds up, doesn't it, over time, right?
Yeah, it really does, and I think that's a great example as well, to be fair, Adam. And again, I think the UK should take a leaf out of Singapore's book. And I think I might not be right with these numbers, but I believe it's a relatively straightforward tax code and the tax system. I think it's 15%. I believe it's Singapore. Apologies, by the way, if you're watching this and it's not. But I do think that, again, people want simplicity, I think, in life, and you have to go where you're treated best, not just on a human being level, but you have to go where your capital is treated best as well. And
Yes.
at the moment, I don't think a lot of that is necessarily in Europe. It's in other parts of the world. And I think the key thing to get across is that they don't all need radical changes, depends on your perception. But they also don't need to be financially excruciating either. You can do things quite cost effectively, but you do need to go where capital is treated best. And the less red tape and bureaucracy you have, of course, there's a fine line with everything. If you have literally no red tape and no bureaucracy, it's going to be
anarchy.
Almost like a Mad Max scenario. But at the same time, you don't want to become such a nanny state where you've got to ask permission to do literally everything. So you've got to, like with most things in life, you do have to find that balance.
Yes. Yeah.
But for me, I do think that a reduction in government size and a reduction in government spending, and being more efficient in whatever government it is and they're spending, I do think that they're good qualities to have. But again, that theory versus what's politically going to get you into power or keep power are two different things. And I think that's also an issue.
Well, what's interesting as well is I remember reading about Georgia and the Caucasus, and how they were in trouble, and the IMF came in, and the former leader there, and he has a name that I'm not going to bother to try to pronounce it. It's like an unpronounceable name for most non-Georgian speakers. But anyway, he put in a rule where if they wanted to, the state that is, wanted to bring in one regulation, one had to be cut. And I think that was a good idea. And I would maybe go further, maybe say, well, if you want to bring in one, you've got to cut two. And that would definitely incentivize not bringing in loads of more regulation. But no, it's a good point you make. Obviously, there's got to be a balance. But as you say, a lot of people watching this are entrepreneurs. And unless you get so big that you can outsource everything, ultimately, you want to go where it's much more easy to do business, much more easy to live for that matter, because, time is money and so on and so forth. Now, what would be great is if we could finish with a quick fire session.
Okay.
It won't be too difficult, don't worry. So, first of all, then, what is the single best part of living in Mexico City for you?
Food.
What's the worst part?
Traffic.
Very efficient with these answers, because I ask some people and it goes on for like a while. So this is very, very good. What's the one thing you miss about the UK?
Quick fire round. I'm just going to give you a slow answer. I would say I love a curry, so I do miss a good curry, I have to say.
Okay. Biggest misconception about living in Mexico, or Mexico in general, from the point of view of like outsiders, like people who are from, say, the UK or US or outside?
If you're in the right place, it's as safe as anything. If you are concerned about safety, and I did see the Mexican government apparently issued a travel warning to its own citizens to go into the UK last week. So yes, it's not as bad and as cartelly as people make it out to be. It's quite a safe place if you know where you are and what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming in today, Robert. And finally, how can people reach out to you? And what would you say are the plans for the future for the Contrarian Capitalist?
So the Contrarian Capitalist, I think I mentioned the tagline earlier, it's protect your wealth, defend your freedom, outsmart the system. The contrariancapitalist.substack.com is going to be the best place to find me. There is a YouTube channel with the same name as well. The idea is to document what I'm doing, get around the world, to be as tax efficient as possible. As I said earlier on, I don't do financial advice, but I think that people, the idea is to give people ideas. If I can do it, you can do it. We talk a lot about markets, commodities, gold, silver, those sorts of things. So I'd urge people to head over to Substack, again, the contrariancapitalist.substack.com. Give us a follow. You can subscribe for free. And again, loads of podcasts. I've got a podcast by the same name as well. My job is to literally show that if I can do it, you can do it as well. And as I said earlier, I'm hoping that the channel inspires people. I want to 10x it in the next 5 or 6 years. I really want to grow it into a behemoth. And again, it's just about living life, having fun, being yourself, and again, just showing people that you don't have to stay where you are. You don't have to feel trapped if you feel trapped where you are, and showing people that the world is a nice old big place, and there's plenty that you can do to help yourself and live the life that you want to live.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming in. And for everyone else, like and subscribe both to Robert's Substack and to my channel. And until next time, have a great day.